Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Susie Gelman, and it's my privilege to serve as the board chair of Israel Policy Forum. Before we begin today's webinar, I would like to ask all of us to take a moment to acknowledge the real pain that we and many others in our country are currently experiencing. It's been just over 2 weeks since George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis, and just a few weeks since the killings of Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. As George Floyd is being laid to rest today, we continue to confront the menace of racism, hatred, and violence in our country that remains all too pervasive. We all need to do better, and we need leadership to help guide us on the path toward rectifying 4 centuries of racial injustice. I'd like us to pause for a moment of reflection on how we can move our country forward and help bend the arc towards justice and freedom for all Americans. Thank you. As always, if you are new to Israel Policy Forum, I want to welcome you. Israel Policy Forum is committed to advancing a viable 2-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in order to ensure Israel's security and its Jewish and democratic future. In furtherance of our core mission, we've been raising the alarm about the threats posed by West Bank annexation for the past 3 years, educating American policymakers in Washington, American Jewish communal leaders, and emerging leaders of the next generation. Now, annexation appears ever more imminent. Just yesterday, Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz called upon the IDF to begin preparations for annexation. Last week, Israel's coordinator of government activities in the territories warned of the potential for a violent escalation should annexation take place. The Israeli security establishment has confirmed that most coordination has been suspended between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. While we cannot forecast the precise consequences of annexation, the seriousness with which active Israeli defense officials are treating it should be proof enough that there is a grave risk to the state of Israel's security as well as its democratic and Jewish character. In the face of this most serious challenge to our mission, and despite the current global public health crisis, Israel Policy Forum has been ramping up our output. In March, we launched our Tuesday video briefing series. Our podcast, Israel Policy Pod, has doubled recordings and now publishes 2 episodes each week. Our growing Young Professionals Network, IPF Atid, continues to convene regular virtual gatherings and is launching its own campaign against annexation, Our Future Israel. The Koplow column, published every Thursday by Policy Director Michael Koplow, remains a highly sought-after source of commentary and analysis on Israeli politics and the Jewish world. Now, I'm very pleased to announce, and you're the first ones to be hearing this, that in just 2 weeks, on June 23rd at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, we will be convening a special virtual gathering, The Road Ahead, Leading Responsibly for Israel's Future. This program will feature conversations on the ramifications of West Bank annexation with top American and Israeli security experts and Jewish communal leaders, including General John Allen, Ambassador Susan Rice, Ambassador Daniel Shapiro, Michelle Flournoy, Admiral Ami Ayalon, Major General Gadi Shamni, General Danny Yatom, and Rabbi Rick Jacobs. You can find more information and register at ipf.li/The Road Ahead. Through these initiatives, we're reaching thousands of people every week, including hundreds who are being introduced to our work for the first time. The past 2 weeks' webinars drew over 1,000 participants. But we depend on your generous support in order to keep going. And I want to encourage you to make a contribution, particularly at this moment when Israel is poised to annex West Bank territory with the backing of the Trump administration. Your support is more important than ever. To all of our supporters on this call, thank you. For those who have not done so already, I encourage you to make a contribution to Israel Policy Forum at www.israelpolicyforum.org/giving. In confronting West Bank annexation, The consequences for Israel's security have always been paramount for us at Israel Policy Forum. As the Israeli government gears up for some form of annexation in the coming weeks and months, Israel's security establishment must prepare as well. Today's speaker is intimately familiar with these processes. I'm so delighted that we're joined today by Alex Fishman. Alex has been a military correspondent and defense analyst for 44 years. And for the past 25 years, he's been a security commentator for Yedioth Ahronoth, one of the most widely circulated newspapers in Israel. And he's also a good friend of Israel Policy Forum. We've met with him in Israel and look forward to meeting with you again, Alex, when circumstances permit. Two final reminders before we get into the program. First,
I've got a problem with the
yeah.
voice. I will try to change place, so I will try to place myself somewhere else.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Voice.
All right. Sure, Alex. Do what you need to do so we can hear you.
Somewhere else.
Okay.
Oh,
so everybody, our speaker is just relocating to get a better signal.
Hear you, that's all. I will try to go outside somewhere.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Now it's better. You hear me?
It's kind of scratchy. Two final reminders before, yes.
It's better or not?
Evan, do you want to, I don't know.
With the computer, I don't know what's happening.
Because you were good.
Still breaking up.
Yeah.
No, it's still not working.
Okay.
It's still not working. I will try my cellular.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay. While Alex is getting himself set up, two final reminders. First, a recording of this briefing will be posted to our website, www.israelpolicyforum.org, following the conclusion of today's program. Second, we encourage audience questions for our speaker, which we will make time to address in the latter half of the program. If you're joining us via Zoom, you can type a question in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you're calling into the program, you can email your questions to info@ipforum.org. And again, before we get started, I just want to give you the link for registering for our upcoming June 23rd virtual event. It's ipf.li/the-road-ahead. Alex, how are you doing? Are we together? Okay, I see we're relocating. Bear with us a moment while Alex gets himself better situated. Bear with us. We usually deal with these technical issues in advance of the call, and we had Alex on and everything was fine. And then this happened. Alex, we see you, but we don't hear you yet. Looks like you're connecting.
Yes.
Okay.
Now it's better?
Much better. Great.
Can you
okay.
hear me? Because I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Okay. You hear me okay?
I apologize from all the participants. Yes,
okay.
I'm here.
Okay, so let's get started. Alex, could you please first give us a brief overview of how Israel's security establishment is responding to the possibility of West Bank annexation?
I will be direct with you. I visited the defense ministry 2 days ago, and I must tell you that I find out a lot of frustration there. And I ask what's going on, and they tell me that they started to build plans only 2 days ago to build plans for the new defense minister. It's very frustrating because they don't have any information about what's going on. They started from scratch. And after a short time, I met with the people of Gantz himself and asked them what's going on. I said, we didn't see a map. There is no maps. We don't know about what he's talking. He's talking about principles. There was a meeting 2 days ago with the Ambassador Friedman and Mr. Ashkenazi and Gantz and the Prime Minister, and there were no information, a concrete information that you can start to deploy forces, to build plan. And they were joking with me, Alex, you wrote on Friday that there are 4 scenarios. So we took your article. I don't know if they were laughing or they were serious, but those are the scenarios that we are working on. It's very, very, very frustrating. But what they can tell me is that there are three pillars that there are constant. First of all, we must understand that we are in the middle of the process of annexation. We are in the process. The snowball started to run because the major player in the Middle East or in Europe or in the States started to react. We can see what's happening in the Palestinian Authority. We can see what's happening in Jordan. And so first of all, we need to accept the idea that even it won't be fulfilled in the 1st of July, we are in the process of annexation. It's not a matter of theory anymore. He climbed to the top of this mountain, and it's very difficult for him to climb down. He's continuing to proclaim that he's going to annex the area and to annex the West Bank, parts of the West Bank. We don't know what parts. We think that we know that it will be a Jordanian valley. Last week, there was a huge fire that breaks through in the Jordanian valley, and the Palestinians said that Israeli in purpose set fire there in order to promote the annexation. It was a military maneuvers, therefore there was a set fire. But the Palestinians truly believe that we are in the middle of this process. There was a ruin of illegal houses there in the Jordanian Valley. They said it's part of the annexation. They said that now they can see that there is much more infrastructure works in the area. And they explain it by the annexation. So we are in the middle of this process. Tomorrow, the foreign minister, the German foreign minister is coming to Israel. He's coming to warn Israel to see what are the consequences. Merkel was talk with Netanyahu. The French minister talked with Netanyahu. They explained him that there will be a punishment, there will be a payment. So we are in the middle of the process. This is the first pillar that we must understand. We are not living in an empty room. It's running. Secondly, what Netanyahu done is he shake two of the 3 anchors that Israel built its whole strategy in the area. The first anchor is Jordan, and it was shaken. It wasn't just a dispute between countries. The Jordanian king, I must remind you, said a month or 3 months ago at the Washington Institute that the relationship with Israel are the worst since the peace agreement. And this event that occurred without even inviting to talk with him, invite him to Washington to talk with Trump, to explain him what's going on, what are the consequences. Nobody invited him. Nobody talked with him. So it's now shake this anchor. We don't know where we are going. Well, in Israel, there is a say that Jordan is so much dependent on the states, so nothing really will happen. It's not true, because the Hashemites, when they will feel that their chair is shaken a little bit, it will be a different approach toward the United States or toward Israel. We remember what Hussein, the King Hussein, said about the invasion to Kuwait. If you remember, he supported Saddam Hussein because he was afraid from Saddam Hussein. We are putting the King of Jordan, which gives us 320 kilometers of depth until the Iraqi border. We put him in a situation that he won't survive. Second, we are talking about an Israeli strategy to get support from both parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. And we are losing. We are losing. We are losing the support of the liberal sector of the Jewish in the States. We are losing the Democrats. So this is the third anchor is the Egyptians. Now we don't know what will be the Egyptian reaction, but I believe that the street in Cairo will speak. So it will be a different approach. Up till now, we don't hear anything from the Egyptians. And this is the second pillars that we need to take into consideration. The third pillar is Netanyahu himself. We need to understand, from my point of view, Netanyahu was the master of the status quo for the last 10 years. And it was worthwhile for him. We get 10 years of relatively quiet in the West Bank, comparing to the last decade. If you remember the first Intifada, etc., etc., it was a relative, very quiet period, the last 10 years. Through this period of status quo, he gained this status quo, first of all, by what he calls the economic peace. Well, to keep the economical situation in the West Bank in a certain position that will keep them quiet. This was the policy. And if you remember, he never ordered the army to remove Hamas from Gaza Strip. Never. Through this event in 2014, 51 days of this, I don't know what to cooperation. For a moment, he didn't ask the army to remove. He needs this status quo. It's played for him. During this period, Trump came to power. It was an accident, okay. But he strengthened his relationship, we strengthened our relationship with the Saudis, with the Gulf countries. The Palestinian, Abu Mazen, wasted his time, waited for somebody to talk with him. But he was for policy of keeping the area quiet. So we find ourselves at the eve of annexation with those three pillars. And from here, we are starting to play the game. Please.
Absolutely. That's pretty sobering, Alex, as a starting off point. So, as you know better than most, the Israeli military is preparing for the fallout of annexation, but defense officials, and as you noted in your remarks, they say they don't know what Netanyahu's precise plans are. What impact could this have on the implementation of annexation should it occur? And what do you make of this situation more broadly?
Well, I must tell you that it's not true that they weren't ready to do something about it. They are preparing papers since January. Since January, the chief of staff asked his planning department to bring him something to deal with, to start with, because the implications are military after all. And they started to work in 3 different committees. One of them, I believe it's the most important, is the legal one, because up till now, there are legality problems. What will be the how to say, how to react towards the Palestinians without that will annex them in our, what will be their whether they will be an Israeli citizen, whether they something really will occur. Can they move freely from one place to another in this area? These questions, what will happen with the lands? These questions are, first of all, legal, and I think they don't have any answer in the government up till now. What will be the legal aspects of this event? The second one was strategic one. What will be the reaction of Jordan? What will be the reaction of the European? What will be? We are trying to not to take into consideration the Europeans, but it's a mistake. They are very sensitive to their position in the Middle East, and we are not taking them seriously, and we shall pay for it. And the third committee was the military committee, and they were playing on 3 different scenarios. The first scenario is the scenario that nothing really happened, because it can be from a different perspective. First, that it would be only proclamation, declaration, and that's all. Nothing really will happen in the area. Secondly, if the annexation will be in a place like Gush Etzion, for example. Gush Etzion, it's south to Jerusalem, somewhere. It's something that there is a consensus, even among the Palestinians. It's not a consensus, they disagree, but they understand that part of the places will be staying in Israeli hands after the treaty. So it will be much more peaceful. I don't believe it will be peaceful, because the anger in the Palestinians, among the Palestinians, waiting only for a small match, a candlelight. The tension in the streets, you can see the petroleum, you feel the smell, the petroleum smell, that everything will blow up in a minute. And the despair, because they understand that this is the end of the story of 2-state solution. They understand it, everybody understands it. It can be also the end of the Palestinian Authority in the West. The second scenario is the scenario that we know, demonstrations, unrest, something that the army knows how to deal with. And the army have got its special units in the West Bank. It's a lot of brigades that are patrolling nowadays, deployed in the West Bank normally. So it's nothing really. But the third and the fourth scenarios dealing with terror, and the fourth scenario is what we call it's a real shift from cooperation with the military organization, security organization of Palestinians. And we are talking about 65,000 armed people. If they will turn their weapons towards the settlers or the army, we are in a war. 65,000. The security, the army, the police, but altogether are 65. Nobody even take it into consideration that they were building 40% of the civil workers of the Palestinian Authority is the military. They were trained and by the British, by the Americans, by others, and they've got half track, but they've got small arms, and small arms can cause a lot of trouble. And we are not talking about the Tanzim, the organization of the Fatah in the camps, in the refugee camps and towns. They are warlords. They are not, if they will feel that the Fatah is losing its position, it's in the PLO, and they were losing to the Hamas, they won't ask from Abu Mazen a permission. So we are in the middle with a potential huge crisis of Israel conquering again the West Bank, mobilize them, the reserves, and going back to conquer the West Bank. This is the worst case scenario. But everything can be occurred nowadays. Nobody knows what he wants.
Alex, can you talk a little bit about the current breakdown in security cooperation, even before the July 1st date when annexation could actually begin to be implemented? I think I read that
Yes.
the Palestinian security forces gave information to the IDF about a planned terror attack, planning, I think it was IEDs near a checkpoint or on a road that the IDF uses frequently, just as one example of how the security cooperation protects Israelis as well as Palestinians. Can you talk a little bit about the current state of affairs?
Yes, understand. We have got the same enemy, the Hamas and the Islamic Jihad. And so we cooperate in arresting those people that are rivalries also to the Palestinian Authority and put the settlers in danger, the Hamas terror groups. So we are continuing to arrest them, and the Palestinian Authority continue to arrest them separately from us. That's first of all. But I must admit that I didn't believe it will take so long, this break, the disengagement between Israel and because they depend on us much more than we depend on them. And they depend on us for a free passage through the areas that Israel controls. And there is the problem of Jerusalem, no man's land Jerusalem. Who is arresting them? Who is controlling security there? We are not letting them to go there. So what is going to do? Up till now, nothing really happens. Much more important is the breaks, the disconnect the civilian relationships. Because in purpose, and I must say it's not only my point of view, in purpose, they wanted to show the world, to show the Palestinians that they suffer from the Israeli policy by showing them that they are not collecting the tax, revenues that the Israeli gave them every month. It's a tricky way for them to deal with that. It's changed the atmosphere. And they are not letting those Palestinians that get permission to go to Israel to renew the papers. So if the economical problems will become much deeper and the authority will get to we have got now, I don't know how many, but from 140,000 businesses, 100 was shut down. And this is the core of the Palestinian economy. So if the economical situation will be in a crisis, the atmosphere in on the streets will be very militant. It's not playing. So, and the authority encouraged this atmosphere, encouraging this atmosphere. For example, the disconnecting from Israel gave them the opportunity to show that they are not collaborate with Israel. They put the head of the security forces on the front of their propaganda as heroes that confront Israel. They want to clean themselves from being collaborators in the eyes of the Palestinians. So the atmosphere is very, very depressing. So I don't have any good news to tell you about it.
We're here for the real story from the ground in Israel, not for good news or bad news, Alex. So don't worry about that. I'm going to ask you a couple more questions, and I want to remind our audience, if you have a question, if you're on Zoom, please click on Q&A and type in your question. If you're on the phone, you can email your question to info@Israel Policy Forum or ipforum.org. Alex, how does the lack of awareness in the lead up to annexation, I'm talking about the lack of awareness on the part of senior Israeli security officials in terms of knowing what's actually being planned, how does this lack of awareness compare to how the Israeli military prepared for other significant territorial changes, such as the Oslo Accords, the Gaza disengagement, or the withdrawals from the Sinai Peninsula and southern Lebanon?
The army is very organized. They are organized. They know what to do. The army is not the problem. The army will obey. The army is ready. You know, it's a matter of a day or two to deploy the forces. We are not deploying it 400,000 miles from home. We're deploying it in the porch of our house. So it's not a problem. The military is not the problem. The military will be ready. And the problem will be the casualties. The readiness will be a problem of, we will pay with casualties if we will be not ready enough. But there is no comparison of force between Israel and the Palestinians. So we are not talking about a military problem. We're not talking about really military problem. We are talking about something else. We are talking about change, a deep change on the status quo. A deep change of Israeli position in the world. We are talking about a deep change after could be a deep change after the election in the States towards Israel. Everything. We are talking about something that it's a mystery for a lot of, the Israelis are not dealing with it. I'm talking about the normal Israelis. The normal Israelis, only 4%, there was a survey last week that shows that only 4% of the Israeli interested in the annexation. A lot of them don't know where it will be, like the military don't know and even don't ask. I don't think that you can see in the papers, it's not the main issue. I'm talking about something that the snowball that started to run, but the people are not feeling the same. The military is very aware and very worried about what's going to happen. The trainings are different nowadays. They know exactly what kind of mobilized forces they will bring to the places that they need to be and to deploy them each place. They will cut the area to pieces and they will cut areas from areas. They know the technique is known. We are there for the last 50 years. It's not it's not the first intifada that we are facing. It's not the first operation. The problem will be the casualties that will be, if we will play the third or the fourth scenario, we are talking about hundreds of casualties. I must remind you that the second intifada, Israel suffered 1,030 deaths, if you remember. And it was a huge amount of civilians. were among them. If you remember, buses was blown every day. We forgot it. And everything could occur. I don't know. We always build on the passiveness of the Palestinians, that they're tired of riots, but it's not true. It's not true. There is a new generation there. There's a new problems, and they are different from their parents. They're much more active. They're much more militant. They're their parents. And today, most of the pupils are at home. The West Bank, they end the year. They didn't go back to the schools. So the soldiers, so-called, are there. They will be on the streets, those teenagers. So I can't say that I have something new to tell you that you don't understand by yourself.
So I have one more question, Alex, and I'm going to include in my question a question from one of our audience members. This is about Benny Gantz. He's now defense minister, taking over from acting defense minister Naftali Bennett. During Israel's previous election campaigns, as you know well, Gantz signaled his opposition to annexation. How do you think this has impacted the behavior of the IDF and the security services in the lead up to annexation? And another question about Gantz, which comes from Richard Williams. The media is reporting that Minister Gantz is going to Jordan soon. What will he tell the king and the military there that can reassure them?
Well, I believe Gantz today visited the Central Front, and they show him the plans, the military plans, and he signed the orders. Everything is ready, to say the truth. Gantz and annexation, it's a mystery, because if you remember, he visited Trump in January. And after that, he was talking about his acceptance of annexation, but with coordination. The word coordination is a very weak word, a tricky word, coordination with whom? Secondly, in the last survey, 2 days ago, Gantz party reached 12 or 11 seats in the Knesset. He is the fourth party nowadays. So his power is less than Netanyahu won't take him into consideration seriously. Thirdly, Gantz and Ashkenazi believe that they can maneuver the Netanyahu by coordinating with the Palestinians, with the Jordanians, with the Americans. They got a bypass to people that surrounding Trump. They think they've got people surrounding Trump. You know better than I do who are the people that surround Trump. They believe that that Kushner working with them, and Kushner will save them from David Friedman. No, Kushner will save, first of all, the king of Saudi, save the business of his family, first of all. So we are talking about rookies in politics, if you understand what I mean.
I do understand.
And now put them turn them in his finger. And they wanted to survive in this mess. But today there is another problem. You are not aware of that there was the Supreme Court, they canceled the decision to confiscate private lands, and there is a crisis between Blue-White Party and because the Blue-White Party supports the Supreme Court, and the Likud are very angry, and the settlers are very angry. So they've got much more problems immediate problems than the annexation.
We have a number of really good questions, Alex. I want to try to get to as many audience questions as I can. David Cohen asks, have you been able to probe Israelis' reactions to the security establishment's messages against annexation? Is that having any impact? I mean, you mentioned earlier that annexation is very low on the list of priorities for the Israeli public, but is the security establishment's message on annexation getting through at all?
The security will obey. The military will obey without asking questions. That's you must understand. Who is gonna try to stop or to do something about it is only Gantz and Ashkenazi. The chief of staff won't oppose the policy of the government. Hello?
Yeah, we're here. We hear you. Okay. You're good.
Yes. So don't wait that the army will oppose the government, the policy. They won't oppose. They can talking what we called behind the scenes, that we can brief somebody that they are not happy with the situation, they don't know what's going on, but that's all.
Alex, Gary Gilbert asks, what is the thinking among security officials about the Jordan Valley as a necessary element for Israel's security? Can Israel maintain a security position without control of the valley, in other words, without annexing? And are there any alternatives to Israel's control? I take it through annexation.
Yes, there is a consensus through the years. If you remember the Alon plant and the Rabin and everywhere, and everybody since this period that we were dealing with the Jordans, they consider the Jordan Valley as a strategic area, important strategic area for Israel. First, but nobody was talking about annexation. They were talking about leaving force along the Jordanian River. Without annexation for 10 years, for 15 years, part of the peace agreement. And that's what the Jordanian believe that we believe the Jordanian will accept. Those units, the military units that work together with the Jordanians, keeping together the border. So this is the way that what we are facing now, it's a different story. Annexation, it's a different story. There is no consensus among the settlers about, but from a military point of view, it's a very important area for Israel. To change this, it's need to be something dramatically that Israel will leave, like Golan Heights, will leave altogether the Jordan Valley. It's very important area for Israeli security. The passages over the checkpoints over the Jordan River with Jordan, also important for the Jordanian himself. You must understand that most of the Jordanians are Palestinians. A lot of them. They've got 3 or 4 million refugees now. And they need to be on the safe side when Israelis are standing in front of them, not the Palestinian police. But this is not an annexation. This is breaking the peace treaty with Jordan. They didn't accept the Jordan River as the Israeli border, as an Israeli border. So they can accept us as patrolling this area, controlling this area, but not annexing this area.
So are there any reassurances that Benny Gantz could give to the King of Jordan?
No, I don't know. And if he will go, I don't know what he's going to suggest. He will suggest him cooperation. He will suggest him what? He will give him a little bit comfort. What?
We have, sorry, did you want to say more?
No, no.
Okay, I'm moving on.
Wait.
We have related questions from two of our board members, so I'm going to ask them together. Charles Bronfman notes that he's read that because of Bibi's cautious nature, the annexation may well only encompass Ma'ale Adumim or Gush Etzion or both.
Maybe we don't know. Maybe it will be a relief for the military if it will happen in Gush Etzion. It will be a great relief. Mr. Bobman knows Netanyahu much more than I do, so he can ask him. But the military will be grateful to Netanyahu if the annexation will be in Gush Etzion. But nobody knows. And he was talking about the Jordanian Valley, if you remember. And it's not, it's because in Jordanian Valley there is less private lands than near Gush Etzion. Therefore, he's talking about the Jordanian Valley because there are only 20% private lands there. So it's easier to annex there.
Bob Ellman asks, will there be any difference in Palestinian reaction to annexation of the 5 main settlement blocks, which are 3% of the West Bank, versus annexation of the Jordan Valley, which represents 30% of the West Bank?
We're talking theoretically, 30% there is, which appears in this Trump plan, the grand strategy of Mr. Trump. He's talking about 30%. And the 70% that will give to the Palestinian Authority for the Palestinian states, and 13% in the Negev. Nobody pay attention to it, but the Negev will pay 30% that will be part of the Palestinian states. I don't think that Mr. Netanyahu is ready to annex 30% because he has to pay a lot, much more than it's agreeable. Nobody really thinks that Israel will give up 30% of the Negev. So we are playing in what we call this gray area that in between, because the Palestinians got 3 years to decide what they want. Through these 3 years, Israel can play with 10%, 20%, not more. 30% is the end of the process. And 30%, the areas of the 10% are areas with a lot of private land that you have to confiscate. And it's a problem. You need to be cooperative with the Jordanian and with the Palestinians, with everybody, in order we shall get through it quietly. There is no chance.
Another questioner asks, what about the informal cooperation between Israeli and Jordanian farmers on the two sides of the Jordan River?
Well, you must understand the cooperation with the Israelis. I'm not talking about just farmers. Farmers, it's normal. We've got workers that work in the Eilat. You know, every day, big amount of workers coming from Jordan, from Aqaba, to work in Eilat. It's a peaceful relationship. It's a fantastic relationship. It's, but the military cooperation, the security cooperation between the two countries, when it will come the day to reveal them, people will understand what we are going to lose.
Alex, David Yaffe asks, are you taking Knesset approval of annexation for granted, or is it likely that the Knesset will extend this time period?
No. The Knesset, they've got the majority there. Even the Lieberman party, if you remember, Lieberman party and Bennett party, which belong to the opposition, will vote with the government. So don't even think about what the problem is. Another government that will want to shift back the annexation will need 80 hands, 80 hands to vote to reverse the annexation. It can be occur. If there will be annexation, it will be for life. I can't even imagine that the government, that the Knesset majority is the right wing in Israel. It's true. The right wing with all its variety of colors, but it's right wing. And Benny Gantz, we don't know whether there is a right, blue, blue, white, white, blue. We don't know really what these things. Look, you don't understand. As in America, military people that raised in the army for 40 years without politics, they castrate them. They don't deal with politics. In one day, they become politicians. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Politician, it's a profession that's some part of your nature. Those military people got good intention, but they are pragmatists. They lack of ideology. I'm not mocking at him. I'm telling, this is the fact. Remember, Barak was, can you tell me what was the ideology behind Barak? Nobody knows. Ashkenazi, what is ideas about, I don't know what, economy, for example? Can you tell me? Where he shaped his ideas? During his service in the army? So I'm not building on this nice Israelis, our good guys. They are not politicians. They won't be even. They weren't raised, they weren't educated to be politicians. They were military leaders. It's a different story.
Mhm.
Eisenhower was alone.
Alex, Harvey Bach, again, looking to July 1st and beyond, do you think the recent settler movement opposition to annexation pursuant to the Trump plan will give Netanyahu a way to either delay or mitigate going forward with annexation?
I don't know. I'm telling you the truth. I don't know. It depends. Look, what will really influence Netanyahu, from my point of view, from my small understanding of the international politics, is the attitudes of Mr. Trump. Whether it will be beneficial to his campaign or not. If Trump will decide to ask his good friend from Jerusalem to postpone the decision, he will postpone. He will find an excuse. He will blame Gantz for this event. He will find somebody to blame that is not keeping his word, and because he is not naive like his opponents, he will find the guilt. He will put on Ashkenazi that they were bypassing him and went to the president and went to the scenario is known, but it depends only whether there will be an interest in Trump Oval Office to change Netanyahu's plans. That's all. This is the only guy that can change. Nobody else.
As a follow-up to what you're just saying, Alex, Gabriella Goliger asks, are there any signs that the Trump administration wants to put the brakes on annexation? I'm saying signs.
I don't know. There are rumors, but you know, rumors depends who is. We are citing, we're quoting people from here, and they're full of what we call what is the word for false information, fake information. It depends. Interests. Yeah, fake news. Interests. People with different interests quote different people. We don't know really if there are signs. We know that Friedman is very much pro-annexation. He is representing the right wing. He's not an ambassador. He's a politician, an Israeli politician with a title. He's not even look, the Danny Shapiro that will speak with you next week or next month. For how many times he was sitting in four eyes with his president? Once, twice. You know how many times Mr. Friedman sit in four eyes with Trump?
How many?
More than his assistants. He's his advisor. He's not an ambassador.
Right. He was his lawyer.
So his influence is much greater than other people. And he's for the annexation. He's praising the settlers. He's right-wing supporters. We never faced such a diplomat in Israel before.
We have time for maybe 2 or 3 more questions, Alex. So one from an anonymous person says, is there anything that Americans who love Israel but are very concerned about annexation can do, in particular trying to influence Israeli opinion?
I don't know. Well, it's a tricky question. I really don't know. I'm not an expert in psychology of masses. I don't know. The only person that can put a pressure on Netanyahu, we talk about Trump and his companions. But if the American citizens wanted to do something good, they should put a pressure on their president. And we know how much influence normal people, got on your president. So this is the only chance that he will do something about it. Maybe he will feel that it's not beneficial or something worthwhile. So I don't know. But this is the address, not in Israel.
Ted Greenwood wants to know, would opposition from the Europeans affect Netanyahu's decisions about annexation in any way?
I think he will be worried about the Germans. He was very fond of the German lady. He's very fond of her. She's very influential and she's very pro-Israel. To lose her support is something that's dramatic from the Israeli point of view, because she's very supportive. She's very pro-Israel. And I think he will take it into consideration, but it won't be the leverage that will change his mind.
So we have time for 2 more questions. One comes from Jonathan Jacoby, which is, what could Biden do? I mean, I think that question assumes that there's a change in leadership in the country.
Biden should express his views with a loud voice, that the Israeli will understand that we are losing the Democrats. We are losing the bipartisan that is so important to the Israeli defense, to the Israeli existence. We are losing the normal American. So he should raise his voice. This is my personal idea. It's not a military correspondent idea or analyst. It's my personal view. That's all. You need to raise his voice and to say clear and loud that there will be a price for annexation.
Last question, Alex, and then I'll close. Ken Toltz asks, why in the world would Israeli mothers and fathers stand by and watch Bibi risk their children's lives over implementing a political annexation which changes nothing on the ground for the settlers except perhaps making their lives more difficult?
So it's the best question I was asked up till now, I must admit, because the paradox is that the Israeli really don't believe in. Even his supporters think that there is a trick, that nothing really will happen, that it's something, you will find a way to distort this his promises. Maybe he will announce only Gush Etzion, maybe do something small, maybe he just, nobody believed that he will go and announce 20% of the West Bank. Nobody really worried. You won't find Israelis that talk about it as a disaster because the people don't believe in that. So,
wow. Well, Alex, this has been really, really informative. And I thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. And I want to thank everybody who asked questions. And sorry if we didn't get to all the questions, we tried. Once again, I want to thank our supporters who are on today's call. Your generosity makes programs like this one possible. So again, if you've not done so already, please consider making a contribution at www.israelpolicyforum.org/giving. Thank you all once again for joining us today. The link has been fixed in terms of registering for our upcoming virtual event, The Road Ahead, Leading Responsibly for Israel's Future, which will take place on June 23rd at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. Again, go to ipf.li/The Road Ahead. Also, please stay tuned for an announcement regarding our next Annexation Watch briefing, which will take place on Tuesday, June 16th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Because remember, if it's Tuesday, it's an IPF webinar. Again, Alex, thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much.
Until then, everybody, please be safe, be well, and may the memory of George Floyd be for a blessing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Be well. להתראות. תודה.
ביי ביי, תודה.
ערב טוב, תודה.